Hello out there, I'm the Oldest Nerd. First of all, apologies for last week. I had promised all last week that I was going to do a third video that week with a movie review, and I will do one sometime in the future, but I had a setback, a medical condition which has now resolved itself, thankfully, but was unable to produce a video at that time, so I apologize for that. We'll get back to it. However, today's episode of Babylon 5, I think, is the best I've ever seen. And not for the reasons that you might think. Of course, it did have a lot of action in it. There was the plot, of course, in which Earth had declared martial law at the end of the previous episode, and proceeded to find that places like Mars and some of the outlying colonies weren't going to go with that. They believed that what President Clark was doing was unconstitutional, and in fact it was. And it's a matter of decision-making all through it. When you have a situation where martial law is declared and it's an illegal law, do you go along with the Commander-in-Chief, President Clark, or do you go by what you consider the Constitution calls for? And that's the decision that had to be made by all of the captains and Sheridan himself. And it's reflected here in the major that comes in and the captain that comes in of two of the Earth Force fighters squadrons that could not find their way to say that what President Clark was doing was legal, and therefore was doing everything that they could to try to oppose his martial law and to return freedom to the Earth. And of course, they're hunted down by other Earth Force ships, and there's a big battle outside Babylon 5. But that's all for show. What's interesting about the program is the decisions that had to be made by all of the command characters, and a lot of the side characters as well had important parts to play in this episode. And it was all based on decision making. What are you going to do? You are presented with an impossible situation. Are you going to take the easy way out, or are you going to take the right way out? And that's what came to these two ship commanders, the major and the captain, with Sheridan, with Delenn and the Grey Council, and people like the Narns. And with all of this, it's superbly acted, and the pain of having to fight against your own kind, against your own fellow officers, when you know the captain of the ship personally that you're attacking, that you know what their children's names are, and how many of them that they have, and grandchildren, and all kinds of things about them, and happen to be on the opposite end of a battlefield from them. The problem that brings that may never be lived down, honestly. And it's because of politics, essentially, and that's what this show is about. The fact, there have been a lot of shows talking about the futility of war. But war against your own people is something that is even more difficult, because while in history we've always considered the other side to be somewhat less than human, less than the one that was chosen by God, how can you say that against your own people just because one side sides with this political side and one side sides with the other? And so that's where it's left in this episode of Babylon 5, and I think that it's tremendous in the way that it's done. They're not taking political points here. What they're just trying to do is say that when you're called to do what your conscience demands, doesn't come along without a price. So I'd like to know what you think about this. Please put it in the comments below. We'd be happy to read them and to talk about them. And tomorrow, with other things allowing, we'll have our episode of Deep Space Nine to review. And eventually we're going to have that movie review done, maybe this week, maybe next, who knows. But for now, we'll just say that it's up and coming. So until next time, thank you for watching, and until then, don't go far.